Hey everybody, I'm Bede, a.k.a. the Terrible Australian of Super Podcast, and welcome to the very first episode of the Godzilla Diaries, my video review retrospective and look back on the entire Godzilla franchise. You kind of already know, if you watched my introductory video before, you would already know the reasons why I'm doing this, so I'm not going to go into them again. For this one, for this very first episode, I'm going to be talking about the very first film that started it all, the film that brought the big man to this world, and also this year marks the 60th anniversary of this film, and that, of course, is Godzilla, or as it's also known by its original title, Gojira. Um, this is the second time I've seen this film. I think the first time I watched it was about probably 7 or 8 years ago. So it was really cool to sort of go back and rewatch this film. And I sort of won't go too much in the plot because you probably already know what the plot for this film is. So it's basically uh, Godzilla uh, uh, sort of rises out of the sea and attacks Japan. But that's pretty much the basics of the plot. But there's a lot more to it than that. But you've all probably have all seen this film before, so you already know the plot. So I won't go the specifics of the plots of each of these films too much, but I will sort of focus on my feelings and what I thought of the films themselves. At the time when I first saw this film, I did like it. I thought it was a pretty good film that I couldn't deny, its classic status. But I thought at the time it was just good. But also I was kind of annoyed because since it was probably one of the murkiest films I've ever seen, you could barely see what's happening in this film during the night scenes. So a while ago, I sort of bought the Criterion Blu-ray of Godzilla. So I bought that and I rewatched it in preparation for this video. And I have to say, like on the second watch, it enhanced my viewing even more than the first time. I think this is a really great film. And what makes this one different from, say, other monster films or kaiju films of its ilk is that this one definitely has a lot more thematic elements to it that give it weight, both on an intellectual level, but also on an emotional level as well. And it's interesting because now, sort of, at the time when I first saw it, I knew that sort of the first Godzilla, basically Godzilla is basically like this physical, symbolic metaphor of the nuclear holocaust. And at the time when I was younger, I did pick that up, but I picked it up even more so on this second watch. And it's interesting just watching this film now and what happened during World War II of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this film came out about, I believe, 8-9 years after that event. So you can definitely sort of feel that in this film, and and one of the things you can, yeah, like I said, you can really feel that in this film, and that I think sort of gives the film its weight, and it actually makes it much more interesting film than just being, just a monster film. Like a lot of the sort of monster films that came out around that time all sort of had sort of delve into nuclear weapons and stuff like that, because it was sort of the atomic age around that time. But I think Godzilla sort of did it better than all those other films, because it sort of it just makes it even richer as a film. And also there's some really interesting themes and ideas that the film explores as well. And one of the things I sort of was really taken aback by while watching this film is it's a lot. It's a very dark film. It's a very dark and very somber film, and it's kind of interesting sort of seeing this film and then watching the other Godzilla films like Destroy All Monsters or even Godzilla Final Wars. They sort of are slightly more fun, more campy and stuff like that. But this one's a very serious affair. It treats the story very seriously, and it's kind of interesting how the series would progress later on after this film. But Yeah, I knew that the first time I watched it, but the second time it just really grabbed me, and it just stuck out, and it just stood out even more. So it'll be interesting to see how the new Godzilla film coming out next month is approaching this, because I know they're sort of going back to sort of that darker feel of this one. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I think it's very well directed. Uh, Hishiro Honda. I'm sorry if I'm butchering names. Um, I think he does a really good job as a director, and he also co-wrote the script as well. And it's just very well directed, very atmospheric. The cast all do a solid job, but I think to me the weakest element of this film are some of the human characters. Like, I think the actors who play them really well, but I think I would have liked to have seen them sort of more developed. Like, I think the sort of the love triangle between the characters of Imiko, Surasawa, and Go Go. Sorry, I had the Wikipedia page up on at the moment, so I at least had the names. Ogata, sorry. I didn't think was really all that interesting, although, um, but that was during the first two hours. But once it gets in the third act, that's when the characters and that sort of love triangle starts getting interesting, particularly with the character of Surasawa, who's a very interesting and complex character in his own ways, because his character, and spoilers, I should say that is going to be spoilers for these films, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I'm warning you now. He sort of creates this weapon called the Ocean Destroyer. I think that's what it was called, the Ocean Destroyer, that can destroy all sea life in the ocean by removing sort of the oxygen for all sea life in the ocean. It's a bit, I'm probably stuffing that up by explaining it, so forgive me for that. But what's interesting is, though, instead of just like coming up with this weapon and then giving it to the army so they can use to stop Godzilla, he's sort of very conflicted about it, because like he saw like what the bombs did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki years before, and he realizes that he has created a weapon of mass destruction that, like those weapons, could potentially destroy the world. And he's very conflicted about it, because he knows, and he's also trying in that sort of in the film try to find a positive solution for this weapon so that there'll be good uses for it. But at the same time, he's very conflicted, and he goes back and forth whether to release this weapon on mankind or not, or that how the film treats that character and those sort of ideas and the sort of the complexities of him is really interesting, and it again adds another layer to the film. Like, because he's the only person who knows how to create this weapon. So basically, he decides to let the army use the weapon against Godzilla, but he destroys any traces, any papers or anything on the weapon, how he created it. And in a scene that's I found a bit very emotional, was he actually he sacrifices himself in the end so this weapon would work, not only to destroy Godzilla, but he knows that he's the only person on the planet who knows how to create this weapon, and he would rather die himself than letting other people, the wrong hands, get their hands on this weapon, even though it's being used to good use here in this film. So it's really interesting how he's the most interesting character in the film to me. And also the actor who plays Dr. Yamane, I believe his name is, I forget, is Takashi Shimura. I'm probably, again, pronouncing names, so forgive me for that. I thought he was also pretty good as well in the film. He's definitely my second favorite performance in the film, and he's sort of the standard doctor character who tries to figure out how to stop Godzilla. And also, one last thing before I finish up this video is the destruction of Tokyo. that was some really heavy stuff. Like this, I don't know. I've seen Godzilla destroy cities before in the other films that I've seen, but this one was very different. I think because it's like because we actually see people die during this carnage. Like Godzilla destroys buildings that have people in them, and families are killed, and he knocks over this tower that's got reporters and everything. Like you actually see these people die in the film, and I think that sort of seeing all this carnage happen actually just enhances it and makes it more terrifying than it should. Than it makes it even more terrifying. Like even compared to the other films, because basically, they're doing it in a fun way, but this one has it's pretty heavy stuff, and it's kind of depressing. And also when you see the aftermath of the film of the destruction of the city, you can definitely get those shades of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I can definitely see why some people were very like at the time when the film came out, why they were found it hard to watch or found it very depressing. So yeah, I'm glad I got to rewatch this film again because it's definitely even better than I remembered. It's a really great film in its own right, regardless being a monster film or any type of film. So if I had to give this a rating, I'd definitely give it a 4.5. I think if some of the human characters were a bit stronger, it would have been much higher. But for what it is, it's still pretty damn good, and I think it's just a great film in its own way. Um, well, that's the end of this very first episode of the Godzilla Diaries. Now, keep a look out very soon for my second episode. Like I said in the introductory video, after this first one, I'm actually going to do 2 Godzilla films per video. So for the next one, I am going to be reviewing the Americanized version of Godzilla that came out 2 years after the original, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and as well as the official sequel, Godzilla Raids Again. So keep a lookout for that one, and I'll see you all later. See you, everyone.